Welcome to the Men Are Forged podcast. I'm your host, Cartwright Morris. The Men Are Forged podcast is forging men towards a simplified and successful life. So if you're a young professional male, you're looking to make a change in your life, career, or beyond that, then go to calvertandassociates.com, find me, Cartwright Morris, and schedule a strategy session. A career strategy session will help you unpack more of your mindsets, goals, but more importantly, your purpose and your values to how you want to apply to your life and see it affect in your career and in other areas. So go on to calvertandassociates.com and find me, as well as go to menarforged.com and schedule a session as well. If you do not live in the Birmingham area, I do virtual calls for 30 minutes, so feel free to sign up as well for that on calvertandassociates.com. Now, today's episode. All right, welcome to Men Are Forged podcast. I got a great interview today with John Mollura, coming all the way from Delaware. Just up the road.
Up the road. First state, buddy.
Yeah, first state, number one.
First state, number one. We signed the Constitution first. That's all that means.
That's right. Y'all were first in line. I don't know, somehow y'all got first in line, huh?
That's right. Yeah, stuck across the border in the PA.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, how come? Yeah, Penn, they didn't get the first. That's weird. That is funny. That might be a fun little documentary one day.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, John, glad to have you here, man. This is I'm excited. Just got connected, last week. So
yeah, thanks, Cartwright.
Yeah. So John, early on, I'm excited to really dig into your story. So really early on, really pre-career, pre-adulthood, who were some of your influences that really shaped your thinking in your life?
Yeah. So, my father, obviously, he was there from day one. He's still around. He lives just right down the road. He really instilled in me the ability to make tough decisions that are truly the right thing, even though it's not popular. My father's, probably one of the most noble people I've ever met, and will just do the right thing regardless. And when I say right thing, obviously there's a lot of room to interpretation, but he really tries to consider everyone and what's right and wrong. Certainly legally, he was a former state trooper in Pennsylvania. So, he did that job and loved it for a number of years. So yeah, he was obviously probably the biggest person that had the influence in my life to always, he really lived, he walked the walk. When things were tough, he would do the right thing, even if it wasn't popular or there were some personal things. But, from a young age, it was kind of annoying as a kid. Mm-hmm. It's like, Dad, let me ride the speedboats. It says you have to be 12. And he's like, no, you're not quite 12 yet. And that, of course, doesn't compute with a 12-year-old's brain. They're just mad at Dad for,
yeah.
And, but, looking back on it, it's like, those are the kind of things that forged me into really being able to make tough decisions that weren't always popular, but were right, which served me well. And obviously my personal life and, certainly in my former career that I used to have.
Yeah. Okay. So, give me, I guess you left high school at 18. Is that when you moved out away from under your father's leadership and tough decisions? What'd you do after that?
Yeah, when I graduated high school, I grew up in Western PA in a small steel town called Johnstown, and went to Penn State University. Degree in engineering. And
that's a tough loss on Saturday.
Yeah, tough. Yeah, I've been saying that the past few Saturdays.
Yeah, the one before that was terrible.
Man, I was out in the backcountry backpacking with some buddies on our annual trip 2 weeks ago, and they played Illinois. And I came home and saw there were 9 overtimes. I'm like, what? What happened?
And there was only like 30 points scored.
I think they won 20-18, Illinois. So it was awful. But anyway, I don't want to bring the rest of the interview down, so we'll just skip past that.
So just when I was a little side note, you did beat my team this year, so I'm an Auburn Tiger. But
okay,
we'll just put that out there and leave it there, and then we'll continue the interview.
We'll go take a deep breath and move on and be bigger men, right? That's what this is all about.
Right, exactly.
So graduated high school, and my grades were good, but school never really came easy for me. I'm much more of a hands-on practical person. So sitting in school for hours on end, just wasn't my thing. But I was fortunately, I did well enough, but I didn't do well enough to be admitted to Penn State's main campus in the fall. They kind of gave me a trial run. They said, all right, well, you can come for summer session. Let's see how it shakes out. Yeah. So very soon after I graduated high school, I moved out because I had to report for classes, I think by the end of June.
Okay.
So graduated early June, went down to Myrtle Beach for a week with some friends and, came home and then left. And, I lived at school full time. It wasn't like I commuted back and forth. So that was a big growing experience, getting there, especially Penn State as a campus of 40-some thousand people.
Wow.
So found that I was really wanting some camaraderie and direction, and no one was more surprised than me, but I joined a fraternity, which was a good experience, getting in with people, especially to campus that size. And, I didn't have the greatest interpersonal skills back then.
Right.
And that was due to a lot of insecurities that I had that, really took me up until into my 30s to work through. Mm-hmm. So moving out, did the college thing, and it was a good experience. Unfortunately, I did have that work ethic that I developed in high school, just because school did not come easy to me. So while my buddies were all out, majoring in, I don't know, international studies or something like that, I was in mechanical engineering, which, would carry anywhere from 19 to 21 credits every semester.
Wow.
So fortunately, I did have that instilled in me from my dad. When you have a job, you do it, and you do whatever it takes to get it done. So, managed to graduate, not being the smartest person in the room for 4 years at Penn State, and fell into a really cool job just because of something my dad and I actually got into a huge argument over.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I had worked for Campbell's Soup. I did an 8-month co-op there. So worked in beautiful downtown Camden, New Jersey, which you're probably not familiar with it, but it's a really rough neighborhood, especially back in the 90s.
Wow.
It was really rough, but I got to work for this international company. I thought it was cool, and realized that literally counting pieces of carrots at like 4 a.m. when they were doing test runs of some new product was not how I wanted to. That's not what I was working so hard for in engineering.
Yeah.
So I worked there, and then did another internship at another big international company, and almost got an internship with Disney over one summer. I was going to be one of their Imagineers, and I was psyched, and then lost it at the last minute to someone else because they were ahead of me in school. So they had like the course where they could where they learned how to weld and operate drill presses and lathes and things like that. And because of the semester I took off to work at Campbell's, I hadn't had that yet.
Right.
So I lost it. And I was just sitting on my couch. I was all dejected. My fraternity brother came walking in. He's like, "Hey man, you all right?" And I'm like, "No, I'm pretty far from okay. I just lost what I thought was going to be a sure thing." He's like, "Well, what are you doing this summer?" I'm like, "I don't know." He said, "Well, you're outdoors. You want to teach sailing and stuff to Boy Scouts up in the Catskills?" I'm like, there are a couple things wrong with that, dude. Number one, I don't know how to sail or do any kind of water sports. And number two, I'm not a Boy Scout. He's like, "Oh, we'll train you up."
Yeah.
I said, "All right, cool." I was like, "Well, I don't have any other options." My dad's like, "No, you need to go work for Boeing or Ford or find some internship because that'll look good on a resume." And I was so dejected. I'm like, "I don't care, Dad. I'm going to spend the rest of my life working. I'm going to go just hang out in the woods all summer."
Yeah.
So that was a pretty big bone of contention to us. But, he's like, "Well, whatever, you're 20 years old now. You can do what you want."
Mm-hmm.
And so I went up there and worked with the maintenance crew for a while, just because the students hadn't shown up. Mm-hmm. And we were serving all the scouts from the greater New York area.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm up there teaching, I was there like working with the maintenance crew, and because I was the low man with no real skills, I got the jobs like getting the cabins ready for guests, de-winterizing them, they called it.
Yeah.
Which was code for I had to pull like dead mice out of toilets that had fallen in over the winter and just sat there. So that gives you a hint to the jobs that I would get saddled with. I had this
dose of humility, right?
Oh man. Yeah. You want to talk about humility, pulling a mice out of a toilet that's been in there for a couple months. That wasn't good. But I had this, beacon that I was going to learn how to sail and drive boats and teach kids how to water ski. Mm-hmm. And like 2 days before I was supposed to ship out, I remember it's clear as day. I was sitting outside. I was scrubbing rust off like a propane tank or something. Mm-hmm. Another glamorous job. John, go scrub the things that are, filled with flammable stuff. And here's a metal brush. Go scrape those off so we can repaint them. And they said, "Hey, good news, bad news. The maintenance staff loves the work you're doing. You're a hard worker. They want to keep you on all summer." I'm like, "Well, I'm going to be trained in a couple of days." They're like, "Oh, yeah, about that. The guy from last year's coming back, so it doesn't make sense to pay to train you up when someone's already coming in." I'm like, "What?"
Oh.
So once again, I'm like, "Well, I don't got any other options. I'll just stay here, and hopefully all the mice are out of the toilets at this point." Mm-hmm. But then they said, "Well, there's another option: is you could be director of rock climbing." I said, "I don't know how to rock climb." They said, we'll teach you. It'll be like 18-hour intensive days, but we'll teach you how to set everything up and do everything. So I'm like, all right, well, that's better than scrubbing paint off a propane tank and doing all these other unglamorous jobs. So they went, trained me up, had a great summer, had a staff running for me. I think we safely, had almost 800 kids like rappel and climb off natural cliffs up in the Catskills. And it was a really cool experience. And I got back, and my dad's like, "Well, how was it?" And I said, "Oh, it was great." He said, "Yeah, I really wish you would have taken an internship." Fast forward a couple of years, I put that on my resume that I was director of rock climbing for this big Boy Scout thing. And I was interviewing for a job as a project manager for a NASA contractor that made the spacesuit. And they saw that I was director of rock climbing. There was a phone interview, and they said, "What's this rock climbing thing?" And I kind of gave them the story, and they said, "Hang on a second. There's someone that we want you to talk to." And the phone hung, phone went on mute, and this voice came on the phone. This real nasally voice. He goes, "What do you think about rock climbing on Mars?" And I very flippantly said, "Are you going to pay for my airfare?" Here I am. I'm graduating college. It was 2000. The job market was okay, but I was like, "Oh man, I just blew it." Yeah. Being a smart aleck with this guy.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Get him down here." Turns out this dude was the lead test engineer for Mars landing systems for all the Mars missions that landed in the 90s. Because the company that I was interviewing for also made those big airbags that inflate up around these robots. And he was the lead test engineer, and they were getting ready to kick off another 3 projects going to Mars to land in, I think, 2004. So they were doing all the testing leading up to, this is year 2000 at this point. Mm-hmm. So I came down, and this guy and I hit it off like a ball of fire. I mean, he was a hoot and a half, and hired me pretty much on the spot and said, "You're not doing project management. You're going to be a field engineer with me. We're going to go out and test all this stuff for NASA." So for the next 15 years, that's what I did with him as my mentor. His name was Skip. And he was, probably next to my father, one of the really big influences in my life. Skip, gave me a shot. He was former special forces in Vietnam, did a lot of testing for the Air Force until he retired. So he was, I really held him on a pedestal because I'd always wanted to go into the military. That was always what I wanted to do. Either be a pilot or like special forces, but I was born with a congenital foot problem that disqualified me from any military service. Because when I was born, I was never supposed to be able to run or really do athletics, but my parents never told me that. They just,
how about that? That's great.
And, so here I am today, I'm a 3rd-degree black belt in karate and ice hockey player and rock climber and all this stuff.
Yeah.
So this guy Skip really checked all these boxes. He's like, former soldier, really cool, just I don't know if I can say this on your podcast, just total badass.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
so hold on, John. I'm like, this is interesting because it's like you've got the mindset your dad gave you of like showing up, doing the work, being the long career guy, doing what's necessary. But then you also had an out of the box decision to go to the Catskills and be a rock climber, something you've never done. But then also you got something kind of in between of like, you got this job in a lot of ways because you're likable. Like this guy liked you just by your wit and because it's out of box thing but as well as you did the work at Penn State to get the degree.
Yeah. And
it's like all those things added up to then this opportunity. And with someone like you said that like it was really cool because he checked all the boxes of like a childhood thing that you really wanted.
Yeah.
So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Just all those pieces just kind of coming together. And so I just wanted to make a note of that before we moved on. But yeah, continue. So
yeah, and that's what I'd always tell people when I'd go do community outreach. The company I used to work for was, don't discredit some job you have and you think, oh, I'm just driving a forklift around Lowe's, moving mulch around all summer. That could be something that you learn or make a networking connection with someone. Mm-hmm. You learn some unique skill that down the road, you never know how that'll serve you.
Yeah.
That's one of the big things that I really try to let people know is don't discredit the little things in your life.
Absolutely.
It could be a stepping stone or just something to move on to the next thing that's going to be bigger and better.
Right.
Yeah.
So that we kind of look at our life linear. Like you're like, I missed this opportunity with Disney. Oh crap. It sucks.
Yeah.
But then this opened up a much lower opportunity, but then that's what propelled you to the next thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes the drop down really is pulling us back, like almost like a rubber band.
Yeah.
And then we're shooting farther. So I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key to that is the secret sauce is you got to be willing to do that.
Yes.
You got I could have very easily just wallowed and at the bottom and gone and lived with my parents and, just worked at Long John Silver's, but I was like, well, here's another opportunity. Let's see where this goes.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See what happens. So so that was a great job. And Skip was a great mentor in my life because where my dad was he's very binary in his decisions. It's like literally black or white. Like I would have hated to be pulled over by him. Like there would have been I'm late for a work appointment. I don't care. You were going 63 in a 45 zone. You're getting a ticket out.
Right.
Gosh. So like where my dad was very binary, Skip kind of stepped in, and I was living away from home. Like I was nowhere close to home. I saw my parents, but a few times a year at this point in my life. Mm-hmm. And I traveled a lot for my job. Like we'd go all over the world from Antarctica to England to test these things for NASA and the U.S. military. So Skip was always there. And where my dad was very binary, Skip was 180 degrees. He had very much of the mindset, well, let's see if this works. Just see what happens.
Right.
Just roll the dice and, so it was
just give it a shot. Right.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, well, if it doesn't work, we'll figure something else out. Just don't get anyone killed. He called me Molly. He's like, God damn it, Molly, just don't kill anybody. Which was a very real possibility with some of the things that we did. We handle explosives and be around live rocket engines and stuff. So
right.
It was a really cool job. It really served who I was at the time in my mid 20s through most of my 30s, because I was someone who really craved validation. I had extremely low self-esteem.
Yeah.
So I had that looking back on it and learning more about stuff and, having gone through lots of therapy and self-development, realized I had a really bad case of imposter syndrome.
Ha.
Like I literally have like a wall full of accolades from like Department of Defense, NASA, various space agencies and other government organizations that like I could fill my wall up behind me, but like I didn't believe any of it. I can remember one time getting a letter of commendation from the DOD. And I can remember so vividly, I was pretty much having a panic attack on stage while I was getting my letter, and the whole room was like cheering and clapping for the team I was on. And I just remember thinking, my God, someone's going to realize I shouldn't be up here. Someone's going to figure this out, that I'm not as smart as they think I am.
Right.
And it was really difficult to live that way, to not really be able to enjoy anything. So, through a lot of personal development, kind of realized that, you are worthy. And that's one of the hardest things that's been for me to grasp onto and to believe. Logically you can believe that's like, yeah, I'm a person, I have worth, I deserve to be here. I deserve these accolades. I deserve to be happy. But truly being able to believe that has taken at least me a very long time.
Yeah.
To come to terms with that.
And did you, for me, very similar, like, you have to fight for it in the times where you feel the most insecure. That's where I had to really figure out self-talk. How did it really, when you were, it sounds like you were in a lot of those moments where you were getting all those awards, but was it manifesting anxiety? Was it showing up in overcompensating? What was the kind of, and how did you learn to manage that and actually learn from it?
Yeah, I've learned to live with anxiety probably since I was like 5 or 6 years old. And it would get pretty severe at certain times in my life. The way I would compensate for it, probably until I had a real literal change of heart, and point to that moment that God literally physically showed up in my life and saved me. The way I would compensate for my severe lack of self-confidence and just really feeling like I didn't deserve any of this, was, that quick wit that got me that interview and all that. I would, I'm ashamed to say, but it's part of my story and I hope it helps someone else. I would use my quick wit as a defense mechanism to cut people down, cut them off at the knees, man. I was so sarcastic and was just so quick to say something mean. And of course, after I'd say it, I'd feel horrible and then, be up at night. Oh my God, that person probably hates me. And rightly, they should not have been real happy with me, but that's just the way I was showing up in the world, man. Just very snarky, sarcastic.
Yeah.
Anytime I felt threatened, that reptilian part of my brain would kick in and I would just say something to just shut them down. So I didn't have to look anything less than perfect.
Yeah.
So that's how I showed up in a majority of my life. And, looking back on it, it's like, my God, I can't believe I have people from that bulk of my life.
Yeah.
Before 2009 that still want to have anything to do with me.
So you feel like you were that harsh and that like,
I could be, man, I could cut people down and, make them feel, this small. And part of the reason why is, I didn't realize it until I was older, is that I'm an empath. I'm so good at like just reading people.
Yeah.
So I know I have a really good, just innate understanding of what makes people tick. And also I had such deep wounds myself. Like I would, unfortunately put those two things together and figure out how to just, put a knife right in someone's chink in their armor.
Right.
Like I said, I'm not proud of that, but that's part of my story. Whereas now, after I've been chose to be saved and like had my life turned around, I'll get into that. If you want to dig into that, now I use that empathy and that ability to like read people like that to really touch their heart and like pour love into them through those chinks in the armor. Instead of digging that sword in, now I'm able to pour into people that way.
Yeah. Speak life into them. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's one of my favorite quotes is speak life.
Yeah.
My family, I just did a mural in town on a building. That's one of the things we had on it. We wrote speak life,
Wow.
For our family part. But yeah, and that's how I create the portraits that I do, is I can really just see into people and I can see the incredible things inside of them that they either can't see or are choosing not to believe about themselves and pull it out. And then when you see it in a physical form, especially when a photo gets printed, people are like, oh my God, like that's me. Like I remember I was photographing a gal, probably about a year ago, and she was gorgeous. And she came in and we were doing a shoot. And as I photographed, the pictures pop up in real time on my monitor. And I'll never forget, she was just kind of sitting in a chair, and she kind of peeked around the lighting equipment and looked, and she goes, I said, "You all right?"
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I look pretty.
Oh man.
This is like right out of the camera. Like there's no editing, no photoshopping, nothing. I said, what do you mean you look pretty? Man. She's like, you made me look pretty. I said, I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
I said, I set lights up and pushed a button. I said, that's you, man. I'm like, that's how people see you. And that's been really interesting to watch, like kind of her, just the way she shows up in the world now after like doing those kind of shoots and seeing them like that. And that's happened time and time and again. People are like, you made me look beautiful, or you made me look pretty. I'm like, I'm just showing you what everyone else sees and what's truly there. So that's why I really doubled down on doing portraits for my business. Cause I used to do everything, man. When I started, I'd shoot like real estate. I'd shoot products for Amazon on like a white background, that kind of stuff. But doing portraits has really, it's fulfilling for me, and it really seems to impact people in a positive way. Yeah. So that's where I really like doing that.
Man, that's so cool. I mean, just hearing your story, two things that are really powerful that I think, and this is what I love about this podcast and hearing people's stories, like we're all on such a redemption arc. And you're really just using what's already there. Before you used it to hurt, but now you use it for good. And are you even seeing your sense of humor, your sarcasm being used in a positive way? Yeah. I
really don't use sarcasm anymore. It's more like wit, and like, if anything, I poke fun at myself.
Man, that's good. That's really powerful. So you're working with Skip at NASA still. And, so like, tell me just the evolution of that job and, what happened and, what led you to your decision to leave.
Yeah. So I got hired on there I showed up January 15th of 2001. And I remember that because that was the same day they handed me a plane ticket and told me to get my butt on a plane a few hours later. So I showed up my first day, in the real world. Yeah. And, they put me on a plane and sent me to some test site across the country. That pretty much summed up my career for the next 15 years there. We just get sent all over and did some really cool things. So around 2008, after I'd been there 7 years, and I'd really established myself as one of the lead engineers just based on the things we did. And 2008 was when my first kid was born. I've 3 kids right now.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, my first kid was born. My daughter was born in 2008, and I'd been doing okay with like my anxiety and everything. But when she was born, I had a huge anxiety attack because one of the things, in addition to the imposter syndrome, was I was worried I was going to let people down. And one of the things, that I wish I could tell my 20-year-old self, 30-year-old self, 15-year-old self is, if you make a mistake, people are not going to abandon you and leave you like that. Yeah. That's probably one of the biggest things I wish I could go back and tell my younger self is it's okay not to be perfect. Yeah. Because no one is, but even building onto that is, I just had this belief that if I did anything less than perfect in my professional life or family life, like I was just going to be left alone and like a band. So, do you think that was? I mean, not to be your psychologist or nothing, but I imagine having a dad who is very strong-willed, perfectionist, binary thinker, that kind of got translated unintentionally to you. Is that, would you say that's where it stemmed from, of perfectionism? And
today's episode is brought to you by Thrive Marriage Lab. If you want your marriage to thrive, this is a great opportunity to you, because strong marriages are the bedrock of strong churches, organization, families, and community. This is a 12-month pathway for any of you that are looking to really have weekly engagement with experienced marriage counselors, not just one, but many. So go to restory.life/thrive to get on the waiting list for this great program that starts in April. That's restory.life/thrive. And make sure you put the word Forge in the promo code to receive a discount on your monthly fee. Now, back to the episode.
Probably, I think that had a lot to do with it. And there were some times in my childhood where it was kind of, I'd be given ultimatums as like a punishment when I was pretty young. And being a parent now, I see why things like that were said. Yeah. But that's one of the dangerous things about words is you never know how they're truly going to affect someone.
Yeah.
So I carried a lot of that with me, or I carried that with me, and I didn't kind of carry. I carried it with me through much of my life, and even now it still kind of shows up. Mm-hmm. But at the time, this is like I said, 2008, before I'd been saved or like had a change of just the way I show up in the world. It was the first time I was left alone with my first child. My wife was home. She was always around. She was breastfeeding, which is like every like couple hours. Like there's not a lot of time for mom to get out of there. And finally, we'd been home for maybe like 5 or 6 weeks. I'm like, dude, you just got to go to like Walmart, like go do something for yourself. Go get a Rita's at Starbucks. I don't care. Just go do something for yourself. I'll give our daughter a bottle. And my wife's like, okay. So she left, and the kid woke up and went to feed her bottle. She wouldn't take a bottle, and when I couldn't help my daughter like eat, that unlocked Pandora's box, man, in my head. It like I felt so powerless, and as someone who like would get stuck out in the middle of like Timbuktu somewhere in the world and be given some rubber bands and thumbtacks and be able to figure out whatever it was and get us home. Yeah. Here I was with like, the tiniest of humans in like premature baby clothes, not able to like care for my only child. Yeah. And like, man, it like triggered like that part of my brain that says no matter what, you're going to disappoint your family. And now look, this is proof you can't even feed your own child. And that just like set me spiraling into like anxiety, like panic attacks. And then what really drove me to basically seeking out God was a few months after that, my best childhood friend took his own life in an intentional overdose. And he and I had been out of contact for a number of years. Yeah. And I knew he was struggling, but I was dealing with my own mental health stuff at the time and like just didn't have the reserves to like keep reaching out to him. And got a call from a mutual friend that we grew up with that Nate was dead. And like, man, that like just blew, like it just sent me to like in a tailspin. Cause I was still really having trouble with like fatherhood and, being a father, nothing's ever perfect. So yeah, I had this, like, always feeling like I was inadequate at home. I'm sure the sleep deprivation of a newborn didn't help. And then to find out, my best childhood friend who I always looked up to as like an older brother, because I was an only child. So I really looked up to him. And to hear that like he had died, especially in that way, I was like, oh my God, like everything was like unraveling. And like I just couldn't pull myself together. Like I'd show up at work and like I was probably operating at like 30%. And I just remember one day I was getting ready to get in the shower before work, and I was just like, God, I was like, I can't do this. And I was like, all right, either like something's got to give here. So I was someone who actually actively for much of my life pushed God away. I was raised in like Catholic schools and saw a bunch of stuff there that just didn't sit well with me. And I have somewhat rebellious and questioning nature anyway. So you couple that with, that's like, I wanted nothing to do with religion. But anyone that followed Jesus was stupid and weak and, couldn't take care of themselves. Cause I was real big on self-reliance. Like, again, going back to, I had like a lot of abandonment issues. So like, that's why I was always so resourceful, Of course I didn't know this then, like looking back on this, it's like, of course. So
you don't know it in the midst of it.
Yeah. But I just remember that one day, a couple months after Nate died, I just thought I have no other real options here, but this sucks living like this, like always just like on the verge of tears. And I just just said the serenity prayer. And when, as soon as I finished it up and said, Lord, give me the wisdom to know the difference. It felt like a warm sensation, like washed over me, man.
Wow. So
and I just remember thinking, I'm like, all right, either God's real or I've totally just lost my mind. Like I've totally cracked up. And I'm pleased to report it was not the latter. But yeah, ever since that day in 2009, the summer of 2009, like I just started showing up differently. Like I just knew I wanted to be different. And I started, started going to church and started exercising the muscles to keep my mouth shut when I wanted to say something mean or not take things so personally, or just ask someone what they meant.
Right. Yeah.
They said something to me.
So letting wisdom guide you versus your insecurity.
Yeah, exactly. So wisdom was a little bit in short supply there for a number of years. But I, that, like I said, that was the day I got saved and chose to kind of start following Jesus. And, like the bracelet said in the 90s, what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
So
was your wife a believer at this time, or was she?
She was raised in the church, but it was just kind of like going through the motions. Like you went to church on Saturday or Sunday, and you played in the bell choir, and that was it.
Right.
And a lot of that was my experience growing up too, even though I went to Catholic school and was raised in like the Catholic church. It's just kind of like you showed up on Sunday and you did all the things, and they rang the little bell, and then you got out in the parking lot and watched everyone just be complete assholes to each other trying to get out.
That's so true.
So, so she was not against it, but she was just not a believer. We didn't go to church. I can remember I was so nervous when I said, like, when our second child was born, our second daughter was born a few years later. I'm like, I think we should like kind of find a church. And she's like, what? And like, I like kind of told her like how I'd been like, had this change of heart and was like, wanted to follow Jesus. She's like, well, all right. So we went and found the church and, have been, active Christians ever since then, and not just, until we get to the parking lot on Sunday.
Right. Man,
really trying to make that kind of how we guide our decisions and working on our faith, especially when things don't go the way we want it to.
Yeah.
Which happens more often than I would, of course, like, but, really just trusting in the process.
Yeah.
And, one of my daughters, who's very much like me, she's 10. So like when things happen that don't go well, she's like, why is God doing this to me? Why does God hate me? I'm like, that's not the reason. But with someone with such limited life experience, it's like, they don't have a lot of life to look back on that they at least remember and be like, well, see, this bad happened, but look what good came out of it. Or look how we've grown. So it's been interesting walking through that kind of beginning of a faith journey, especially with kids. Right.
Well, so I'm kind of, curious, just kind of backing up a little bit from your experience with your daughter and that imposter syndrome overtaking you, like where failure is inevitable, especially with something so, simple, but volatile, like just so important in
Right.
feeding your child, like, and being and failing at that. And I think just so many men resonate with that experience that we feel so less than when we finally choose to engage in something that we're probably not good at, as in taking care of a child at a young age, and we engage with our kids, and we engage in something and we then fail. How do we go from there? So what is something that you've learned, that you've taken from that experience and now applying your faith to it, applying more of a healthy man, a strong man, a man who loves his kids well? What are some of the things that you've done to kind of help you if that creeps back in sometimes?
If it's something new, then there's always something new with kids as they grow. But just starting right out of the gate, what I wish I had said to myself in July of 2008 when that happened would have been, of course you're not good at this, John. You're new at it. Like, the first time I put on hockey skates, I didn't go out there like Gretzky and, score a goal. I fell and had to push a chair around the ice rink for, a couple of weeks before I got my balance.
Right.
So definitely new fathers. It's like, just realize that you're new at this, and it's not because you're a man. And, when my daughter was born 13 years ago, my first one, things were really starting to shift, but there was still a lot of that old mentality. Like I'd be like getting a diaper bag out at Walmart and going to change my daughter, and would be like, "Oh, do you need help?" It's like, "No, I don't need help. I got this."
Yeah. So
there was still a lot of that mentality of, you're a man, so you can't do this.
Right. Yeah.
So it seems to be getting better. People just not assuming that just because you're a man, you can't take care of a child. But the big thing is just remember, it's a new skill. Yeah. And, you're probably sleep deprived, like all new experiences, you're especially if it's your first kid, like your whole life, like you can think and plan and get all the gear at Babies R Us, but until you're in the trenches, just giving yourself grace and giving your partner grace, they're, whoever you're raising the child with it's new for them too. Yeah. And ask for, the internet's a great resource, right? Figuring how to do that kind of stuff. But giving yourself grace, as a new father or someone maybe who's coming into a family where the kids are a little bit older. And one of the biggest things that I've done that has helped build such a strong bond with all three of my kids. I've talked about my two daughters, and then I have a son who's 8, is admitting when you're wrong. How about that? Yeah. You're not a perfect. Yeah. 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 Because I can remember, there were lots of arguments with my dad growing up, but one of the things that sticks in my mind that I said to him once was, I don't know anything about you. Like I'd gotten in trouble for something, like some stupid bonehead high school boy kind of thing. Like, we didn't burn anything down. No one got hurt. I just remember like just sobbing, saying, I don't know anything about you. Like, I don't know any mistakes you've made. I just see you as this like perfect person. And, I'm looking at myself, I'm like, I'm a complete screw up a lot of times. In high school, I rebelled, had like the long hair and, played in punk bands. I'm like, I don't know anything about you. So like, I really try to tell my kids, like, I admit when I'm wrong. I, try to give appropriate cautionary tales of my adventures and misadventures growing up. Just to let them know that, I'm not perfect, and let's have discussions about things. So that's a big piece of advice too, is, own up when you make a mistake, not just with your kids, but obviously with anyone. Yeah, that's good. Taking more of the skip approach, right? Just trial and error, huh? Yeah, let's see what happens. Let's just figure it out as we go. That's good. Yeah. So, I guess, going back to your story of leaving NASA. So how did that, with that big revelation that you had, your life changing, giving your life to Jesus, and then where does that lead to you change your job and do what you're doing now? So, so the company I worked for when I started there, it was a family owned company. Okay. So it really had that vibe, and they would take on projects that were that skip approach. Let's see what happens. Like, we know we're not going to get rich doing this government job, but let's see what happens. And if for no other reason, let's take it in the name of science and see what we can figure out. A couple years after I was there, they were bought by venture capitalists. And they were pretty hands off for a long time. And then probably kind of after I had that change of heart, a few years later, they started really stepping in more, trying to make the company more marketable.
Right.
And obviously venture capitalists, their whole MO is to buy a company, get the profit to a certain thing, and then sell it. So even though we made good money doing these government contracts, you weren't making oodles of money. And the company had another division that made a lot of money. So they started backing out the government stuff. And then they were taken over by another venture capitalist company soon before I left. And they really came in and kind of cleaned house on all the executives that had been there and brought their own team in. And their motivation style was not the style I liked. I didn't like being pulled into a boardroom and telling my team that had just been up for 21 hours doing a test to quit effing things up. So like I'd talk to the president, because I was now the senior test engineer, because unfortunately Skip passed away in 2012. Cancer real bad, and it wasn't real long before he and I were at some test site, and next thing I know, I'm speaking at his funeral. So that hurt. I was left alone, and that really played into the don't screw up. You're the only person that can do this. So for the next few years at the company, it was really tough because the leadership changed, and I'd go in and talk to the president and be like, hey, look, here's how the people are feeling. And things just didn't really change.
Right.
So I just decided, I'm like, you know what, I'm done with this. So I went and worked for another engineering company, not space stuff, but I still worked with like aircraft. And I went to work for this other company, which was still pretty local because we didn't want to move. Because what responsible father of three goes and becomes a full-time photographer, turns his side hustle of photography into a full-time career with 3 kids at home. I had all these stories and all these, as the author John Acuff likes to call them, noble obstacles,
right,
that I created for myself. So I went to this other company, made well over 6 figures. They were flying me like first class to meetings in like China. I had never been more miserable in my life, Cartwright.
But on the outside, everyone say that's success.
Yeah, like, man, you've made it. You've made it. I was miserable. I just knew that wasn't where I was supposed to be.
How about that?
I just had this feeling in my heart that like this is not where you're supposed to be. So I went to work there June of 2016 and turned in my resignation paper and said, "Dear Mr. Dolan, I'm resigning my position as senior test engineer for Loft Aircraft in April of 2017. I didn't even last a year.
Wow.
And the catalyst for all of that was actually my wife.
Really?
Yeah, we were sitting on the couch, and I think that was right around the time Toby Mac's song Beyond Me came out. And we were watching like the lyric video, and it talks about how, just trusting God to take you further than you ever could before, like take you to those deep waters where you're going to drown on your own. But if you trust in God, he's going to keep your head up above water. And that's what the whole song's about. She's like, that song's about you. You know that, right? Like, you're supposed to be doing photography. You're miserable, dude. And, I kept, like I said, had all these noble obstacles, keeping me from it. She's like, John, I have a good job. She's a public school teacher. So, she has a great job, benefits, pretty secure. Yeah. She's like, if this doesn't work out, she said, just get another workaday job. She's like, but you're miserable. Go try this, like, do it. So I did with her, not only blessing, but kind of putting her boot up my ass to get out the door. So it's been wild, and it's certainly not without its challenges, but looking back on things like you said before, everything kind of takes you to the different point. when I was at that company that I worked at since the day I graduated college, I don't think I would not have been able to just cut ties there and start doing photography. Because I had no plans of ever leaving there. Like people actually, that was still the kind of company where people worked at for 30, 40 years. And I probably could have retired from there. But because I chose to leave that company and like kind of cut ties and realize that you can leave things and it's still going to be okay.
Right.
Having that experience is what gave me the confidence in April of 2017 to cut ties with corporate America and say, I'm going to turn my side hustle that I've been doing for a number of years into my full-time gig. So yes, that's how I landed where I am now.
Wow. Life is a catalyst, and there's a lot there. That's good. When did that love of photography originate? Where did that come from?
On my 7th birthday, this is another one of those core memories. I remember I wanted a hamster, like you wouldn't believe. I wanted a pet hamster. Why, I don't know. I probably saw it on.
It's such a '90s thing, man.
I'm sorry to report that this was the mid '80s, my friend. I was born in '77, so maybe I was the leading edge of that trend. But man,
maybe that's what it was. Yeah, you were just trendsetter.
Yeah. For some reason, I just wanted some rodent to take care of, and my mom, in her infinite wisdom, thought if I get this stupid thing, she's going to be the one taking care of it.
Right.
So we don't know why. My mom still doesn't know, but she got me a camera when I was like 7. And it was obviously film. It was back in the 80s, had like little flash bulbs that would pop and I'd have to change them out. So I got my first camera when I was 7 and just always, it was just always a hobby. I just always loved creating with a camera. It always came natural to me. Yeah. And when I was doing the test and engineering job, like I said, they would send me all over. And I'd always have I'd toss my Nikon in my bag with me. And, I got to go to some very cool places. I was in Antarctica doing testing. So got to photograph there, New Zealand, China, Hawaii, Sandusky, Ohio in February, not quite the garden spot, but always just had my camera with me. And it was always it was just my creative outlet. So I've had to find different creative outlets since my creative outlet is now my full-time occupation. Yeah. So again, it goes back to, men just not being afraid to try something new and be a beginner at it. So I'd always wanted to play in a band and an opportunity presented itself. And I said, yeah, I'll play in a band with you guys. Cause I'd play guitar and that's what I started doing as my creative outlet, just picking up my acoustic at night. Yeah. So, here I am again now in my 40s. My hair's longer again. I'm playing in a punk band again. So my buddies and I, it's fun doing something new, like learning all the software. That's why I got the new microphone for this. That's why I'm like, how do I sound? So, it's fun, just trying new things and.
Yeah. And what really feel like, how do we as men give ourselves permission to do that, to try new things, to be willing to fail, to even make it doesn't have to turn into a career, but it could definitely turn into, a full-time hobby. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that helps me, I remember my therapist, when I started seeing a therapist in like 2003 and starting to the beginnings of unpacking a lot of this stuff. She said to me one time, she said, I'd come in and say, well, this could happen and this could happen. And what if this? And she said, John, really, what is the worst that could happen? So I try to say that to myself. And it's like, well, people could make fun of me. I could look foolish, but it's actually been the complete opposite. It's kind of how I experience things after I start sharing some of my story. Because I remember the first time I ever told a story about having anxiety, I was in Toastmasters at the engineering company. And Toastmasters is a public speaking organization. And I forget what the topic was, but I remember I chose to tell the story of my anxiety, because this is when I was really starting to have a change of heart. And here I am telling a bunch of men, it was mostly men at the company. It was an engineering intensive company. So at the time there was a lot of men there. Former military, if nothing else, we worked on military projects, and I can just remember how many people came up to me and they're like, that was really brave of you. And thanks for sharing that. And so many guys were like, I know exactly how you feel, right there with you. So I think getting back to answer your question, if you look at things from how can I help other people, other men maybe open up and look at it through that lens.
Yeah.
Instead of like, all right, are people going to make fun of me? Think like, hey, maybe I can help someone. I'm thinking like right now, it's like, talking about like things that happened with my dad and stuff. It's like, maybe I can help someone out there that's listening to Cartwright's podcast, And when you look at it through that lens, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a lot of times people are like, man, that's so awesome. Like I've had so many people come up to me. We played our first concert and it was a train wreck, dude. It was an absolute train wreck. Like within the first like 15 seconds, like the singer like thought he was going to be cool and tossed his cowboy hat out into the crowd, knocked over the camera filming us for the live stream. The bass player was getting all into it and stepped back and like snapped one of his cables and the bass dropped out for like half of the first song. So it was like a complete rock and roll carnival.
Right.
So many people have come up. They're like, that's so awesome to watch you do that. I've always wanted to do something like that. I'm like, well, do it, man. Take the painting class, go learn how to do pottery or learn to weld, whatever it is, just do it. Because, it's freeing. And I think, you'll find a lot of people are not that much different and they're going to be like, oh, I always wanted to do that too. And that feels good, at least for me, like being a pathfinder.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in the spiritual sense, like we are made the image of the Creator who is therefore creative. So I think all of us are designed for some creative expression.
Yeah.
Like how powerful that is and like fulfilling, even if like it isn't making money off of it. Right. It's still a beautiful thing. It's like soul fulfilling. So anyway.
Yeah. And also inspires others.
Yeah.
That lens, like someone else is going to be like, oh, maybe I can do X. I can start writing short stories.
Right. Yeah. For every person who's like pointing and laughing, there's a person that's like, man, I wish I had the guts to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. Well, you kind of already said it, but I feel like it was so good. I need you to repeat it. Is what would you tell your 25-year-old self that you know now?
Yeah. Telling my 25-year-old self is that you don't have to be perfect. And if you're an imperfect person, and just because you're imperfect or make a mistake doesn't mean people are going to abandon you right off the bat. Just own up to your mistakes and then also do the work to figure out how to get better next time. The guy that was my supervisor after Skip, he said, John, I don't care if you make a mistake. He said, but if you make the same mistake, then I'm going to be pissed. He said, so if you screw up, just screw up differently next time.
Right.
And, I always, Carl's words echo in my ears when every time I make a mistake, it's like, all right, well, don't do that again.
Oh, that's funny. That's good. Yeah. Oh, man. Well, yeah, John, so where can people find you? What's something you're doing now that, a lot of my listeners need to know about? And so we'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm on all the, Facebook, Instagram under John Mollura, John Mollura Photography. And one of the projects I'm doing right now, it's called the Refigured Project, sticking along with portraits, is a friend of mine had really intensive cancer surgery about a year ago. And his wife contacted me in the spring of 2021 and said, hey, Monty's really nervous about going to the beach and showing the scar that goes from stem to stern. Because he had like hundreds of cancer tumors pulled out of his body. So you can imagine the scar from that operation's intensive. She said, he's worried he's going to scare kids at the beach. She said, could you figure out a way to take creative portraits of people to kind of reframe that victim mentality and to show their scars as something beautiful and to be proud of? So we started the Refigured Project back in April of this year, and have photographed almost 30 people with physical and mental scars.
Wow.
Coming in, a lot of veterans have participated. Obviously a lot of physical scars there, but also talking about the emotional wounds, that they receive, in their time in the service. I've been really pleased with the amount of men that have done it, because, that's usually not something as a rule men get into, is talking about how they feel. So it's really cool to see that shift with men talking about it. So yeah, that's called the Refigured Project. And the really cool thing is it's starting to take off across the country. I've had photographers contact me from across the country and say, hey, can I do a shoot? And it was a come to Jesus moment for me when I thought, man, if I let this other photographer do this shoot, it's no longer going to be totally credited to me. Just being real here, man. I was being very selfish, and I thought, do you want to get this glory, or do you kind of want to, help as many people as possible? What would Jesus do?
Yeah.
And I chose, it's it's not about me. So let's help as many people as possible. So now we have multiple photographers doing it across the country. And if anyone has a talent for writing, I'd love to talk to them, because during the photo shoots, we record what the people are talking about, what brought them in. And we turn that recording over to our writing team, and they craft these beautiful narratives from these stories.
Wow.
And create these social media posts. And that's the Refigured Project. It's on Facebook and Instagram. So love for people to check that out and be involved as a shooter, a subject writer, cheerleader,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's so good, John. Yeah. I mean, just doing something that's so much bigger than yourself, but that just idea that just shows the power of it. Man, but it's so cool that you kind of kicked that off. So, well, I appreciate you coming on. I had a blast. Loved your story, John. Thanks for being so in tune to, just who you are and where you came from and who you are now. It's really cool. So I'm sure everybody's going to really enjoy it. So
cool. Yeah. Appreciate the opportunity, Cartwright. Thanks, man.
Thank you for listening to Men Are Forged podcast. If you would, go to Apple Podcast and rate and review. This helps me reach more people, especially if you enjoyed this podcast, if it meant something to you. Please rate and review on Apple, as well as follow on Spotify. Those are the two platforms I'm on, as well as you can subscribe on YouTube to get highlights and full interviews. So please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you for listening.